Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Catherine Mattice here with Civility Partners. We are a consulting firm focused on building positive workplace cultures. And I'm so excited to have my dear friend Hilary White here with me today. Hi, Hilary.
Hi, Catherine.
So we met at LinkedIn. Hilary was my producer on many of the courses there at LinkedIn Learning, and always just enjoy her energy. And we used to joke that she was like my camp counselor when I would come to LinkedIn because she just made everything so comfortable and smooth and all of that. Just a little bit about Hilary's background. She was early in the days of all of our DEI work and was a special educator for 20 years and taught children with autism, disabilities, deaf, and hard of hearing populations. And I didn't know this about you, Hilary. You taught at-risk teens. And then we're working for integration and acceptance and belonging between different gang members. So that is really cool. And we'll have to talk more about that. And then you were a co-founder, director, and trainer for an American accent training company, 10 years at LinkedIn, and you've done a lot of e-learning and content development and instructional design. So you are a well-rounded individual with lots of experience.
Well, thank you.
So I know we formulated a lot of a friendship around just toxic work environments and how they unfold, and of course in doing our LinkedIn shows or LinkedIn Live, LinkedIn Learning content. I'm like, need some more coffee, clearly. We've talked a lot about toxic environments, so I'm just curious to hear from you. What's a way that somebody can easily identify that they're in a toxic work environment, kind of right off the bat?
Right. Well, I have had experience with the combination of both types of companies. I've been in the workplace for quite a number of years, 30. And so I've had a ton of experiences, not only with excellent companies and excellent managers, but also with some pretty tough, toxic workplaces. And throughout the years, I've learned how to identify. When I was younger, I honestly, I just didn't. I always felt like I could work through it, or it was my fault, or if I just stuck with it. It's like a bad relationship, right? You always think that you can change the other person. I never wanted to quit, right? Or we think that it's quitting. In reality, it's about choosing ourselves. It's about not abandoning ourselves. But ultimately, some of those things that are red flags are if you have no work-life balance, even when you've had conversations with your managers. If you're starting to feel really anxious, and which is different than you feel anxiety on Sunday nights and you got to go to work because your weekend is gone. This is different. This is you're feeling uncomfortable and anxious, and you feel a sense of stress when you're at work, when you think about work, and even when you leave work, it's still always there. It starts to impact your sense of self, your self-esteem. You start feeling like you are not competent at your job. You start comparing yourself to your coworkers. Oftentimes, if there's competition on your teams or competition within the company, that can be degrading to a sense of self. As some of the others is being micromanaged, not having clear roles. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yeah.
Should I go on and on?
I love your answer, because a lot of times I get asked that question when I'm on podcasts, what are some signs of a toxic work environment? And I always answer with the organizational problems, but I love how your answer is about what you feel inside, that you're in a toxic environment if you yourself feel anxious and worried about it. And I just love that. I was just thinking, gosh, I need to start saying that in my answers too. I'm going to steal that from you.
You can have it.
Thanks. I just really appreciate that. It's about paying attention to yourself and how you're feeling, and acknowledging that I'm feeling a certain way. That means there's something wrong, and listening to your gut. I love that.
Well, I remember, honestly, Catherine, I remember you talking about it in the very first course that we created together. Excuse me. And you were telling me your story, which guided you into doing this work. And I remember you telling me the story from the employee standpoint. Like, you were in a role where, of course, you had to be there for other employees, but you yourself were going through the same experience. And I remember you telling me and sharing those stories about what you personally felt like. And that was the impetus for getting out of that role, and then the impetus also for starting your company. And I think that because you personally, you are focused on going into companies and working directly with them, you are somewhat out of that experience of being that employee, right? Not that you don't take that into consideration, because you do with your role. But I'm specifically coming from, how do I navigate through how I feel? And how do I know when it's something that it's a lesson for me to learn, and it's just a growth opportunity? Or how do I know when this really is detrimental to my own personal mental health, or to my own personal life balance? And navigating through that is really, really hard. It's no different than looking at relationships. It's no different than looking at, what do I know to be something that I need, or something that I want, first of all. And then how do I know what's my responsibility, and how do I know what's their responsibility within the company organization?
Yeah, there is definitely soul searching to be done if you're facing a challenge at work, to ask yourself, is this a challenge I can overcome and it will make me more resilient and stronger? Or is this a challenge that I can't win, and if I stay strong, I'm gonna, come out of this torn apart? So there's, really listening to yourself, for sure.
That's exactly.
So when you're in a toxic working environment, because it has been so long since I've been in the employee role in that, what are some of the things that an employee can do to start to try to change the situation for themselves?
Right. I think, excuse me, one of the first things is to determine, again, if it's you, if it's something that you yourself need to change, or if it's a company-wide problem. One thing that I did was using Glassdoor. So I've gone on to Glassdoor, I've gone on to Indeed, but Glassdoor is one of the main places that I go to look at other employees' reviews. So if you go and you're going through this experience, it's not a one-time experience. Some of those things can just be managed by talking with your manager, right?
Yeah.
Or if you have to, going to HR, if you're feeling like that's the next step. If you've spoken with your manager, but it's not going anywhere, maybe you need mediation otherwise. But I always go onto Glassdoor and I look at the company culture from that perspective, because employees will go, you can write reviews anonymously. So it gives you a really good idea of what other employees are saying. If you find that there are other reviews that are specific to what it is that you are feeling yourself, it will tell you it's very validating. And it gives you some guidance in terms of, this is not possibly just you, that other, excuse me, employees have experienced it. And it gives you something to go from. So that's the first thing. Of course, I'd mentioned, the first thing is you've got to go and talk with your manager. If you don't feel like you've got trust with that manager, then of course you seek out someone to help you mediate. Go in and try to find someone who's a mentor or someone that does that role. Another thing too is you got to talk to someone. If you can't talk with your direct manager, and you can't even talk with your team members, you go find a friend. If you don't speak it out, it becomes something of shame. I know that you and I had talked about that before, that if you're holding on to something and it becomes somewhat of a secret, and you're holding that burden, there ends up frequently becoming a sense of failure and shame. And then that just kind of begets more shame, and it makes you not want to talk about it. So if you have an opportunity to be able to talk with someone that you feel you've got trust in, a lot of times that will help you process through and navigate through your next steps.
I'll add to that too. I think it's important to be careful who you are talking about this with, because I see, it always sticks with me that, like, resilient people, all the research says that resilient people have a community around them that they're leaning on. They know they can't navigate things on their own. And then when I think about the book that we did recently on success stories of getting through workplace bullying, all of those people talked about having a group of people that they were leading on, family and friends. But then I also see in like Facebook, for example, I'm in some of these Facebook groups just to see what's happening in there, though I probably need to get out. But it's lots of victimizing each other, like this happened, I talked to my manager and it went horribly, and then everyone's commenting, yeah, don't talk to your manager, they're awful. So it's like, I guess, it's important that you have a community and you're talking to someone, but then also being aware of how they're responding to you. Because if they're helping you go down a path of being a victim, then maybe that's not the best option. You want rational people who can empathize with you, but also help you problem solve, right? And so I'm just thinking about you're talking,
That, what, that is key. That reminds me of something that Brene Brown had spoken about in one of her books, and that was, you've got to be very, very choosy, like you said, about who you share your information with. And most of us have, honestly, very few people that we feel that we can personally trust. And I think, like you said, it's important to get feedback that's neutral. Because you've got to be able to navigate through that. And you've got to find those trusted individuals. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that can take you down such a negative pathway, right? And then, if you, there's so many more things, of course, we don't have time to talk about them, but there's so many more things to do prior to making that decision. But if you've gone through numerous steps, and if you want more steps, you go back to Catherine's courses on LinkedIn.
Oh, thanks for the plug. I'll pay you later.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But if you do decide that the next step is to move forward and maybe look at leaving, don't feel like just because you've made that decision that you've got to act immediately. Again, it's about looking at how to navigate out of an abusive relationship or a relationship that's no longer working, right? That takes time. You've got to put your ducks in a row, right? You've got to make sure that as you exit, you've got some type of plan. And that doesn't always necessarily mean that you have to have a job. It just means that you've got to take the steps and look at what it is you personally need in order to allow for you to move through it. And then even after that, if you do go, you've got to allow time to process through that. It's just because you leave doesn't mean that the emotions behind the experience will go away. You've got to also allow time to go through that process of having to make that decision to leave. And sometimes we've talked about this before. Sometimes it can lead PTSD, and you've got to allow for yourself to navigate through that in a healthy way before you start fresh somewhere else. So, again, you've talked about that in your courses. And I have to say, Catherine, like, you were the first, ultimately, even though I started out in diversity and inclusion way back when, you really were the first mentor for me when I had the opportunity to work with you as a producer. And 4 years ago, and we started talking about this topic, and you gave me the language. Like, I had experienced, seriously, I had experienced toxic work environments, but I can't say that I had the language behind how to explain it, or even how to fully identify until you and I started working together. You were able to give me that language and to provide more context for me. And it has really allowed for me then to identify what's healthy for me personally and what's not, as an employee myself.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And that is something we, I hear a lot that just not, unless you understand bullying as a target, it is very confusing. Or if you're in a toxic work environment, it is very confusing, because you're kind of looking around like, is this really happening? And did that person just say that or do that? And so to have some vernacular and language around describing your situation is helpful. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that. So it's good to be able to have that. I think in California, where we are, that's part of why they added the abusive conduct piece to harassment prevention training. I thought it's not going to solve any problems, but maybe it'll at least give some people some information about what they might be experiencing, so now they can talk about it.
I would agree. I think without having the information and without having the language, it's no different than diversity training. It is. It's all a part of it, right? It is all because most of the time it happens with marginalized groups, but it can happen with anyone. It really, toxic work environments literally can happen with anyone, but ultimately a lot of the bullying happens with marginalized groups. And like I said, I'm a part of a marginalized group, and I have experienced it myself firsthand. And knowing how to navigate through that, and knowing what I can expect to experience, or what my expectations of how I can be treated within the workplace is really important. If I myself don't know how to value myself, and I don't know how I should expect to be treated within a workplace environment, how will I ever advocate for myself? And the same goes for other individuals. So I would say that the work that you have done helps to put a name to it. It helps to create a baseline. It helps to create standards. And then that gives something to work towards and work on as someone at the executive team level, as well as an employee, and knowing how to advocate for ourselves.
I'm curious, I hadn't really thought about this before until just now, that is it different for a marginalized group to, like, we're talking about things employees can do if they feel bullied or if they're in a toxic environment. Are the tips different if we're speaking specifically to a marginalized group or someone who's a minority in the organization and there's nobody else that looks like them? How do the rules change?
I think that I think some of the steps can change. I think that some of the, again, doing the research for yourself on the company, if you haven't done that research prior to going into the company, and sometimes you don't know until you're in, that informs you. But certainly there are so many resources out there now that if you're in a marginalized group, there's so much focus on building diversity and inclusion in healthy workplace cultures. And there's so much information out there that, yes, before you get into a job, do your research about, is this company, does this company have D&I strategies? Do they have committees? Do they have employee resource groups? Is it a conversation that they have? Are they a work in progress? Do they own that? Look on social media. Make sure that the conversations that these companies have on social media align to your purpose and your goals, and align to what you want out of a company. And if they don't, then I would think twice if you have the opportunity before you join a company. If you're in a company, then yes, that is different, right?
Yeah.
But I would say, going back to that discussion about who you choose to talk to, if you are lucky enough to be in a company that's large enough or even small enough that have employee resource groups, and you haven't join, because those are your safe spaces. And for those of you that don't know what employee resource groups are, they are committees. They are groups that are aligned based upon identification of whether it be LGBTQ, whether it be veterans, whether it be women in the workplace, whether it be Black, whether it be Asian. Yeah. Otherwise, there are many, many, many different groups. Yeah. And those most of the time are safe places where you can go. So certainly there are different conversations to be had. If you do come from a marginalized group. I personally would not go into a company now where there was not some type of diversity and inclusion as standards and policies and strategies, and I wouldn't do it. And the way that I know is I'm going to go on Glassdoor first. I'm like, I'm going to look at social media. I'm going to find whether or not it's pertinent to them. I go on LinkedIn. Of course, I go on LinkedIn. I go on LinkedIn and I go to their company page, and their company page, if it's built out, will give you so much information about. Let's look at who they have hired. Let's look at diversity within their employee workforce. That gives you something. It doesn't necessarily speak to inclusion and belonging, but it will at least allow for you to see, is there someone that looks like me, or someone that speaks like me, or someone that has similar experiences and mindsets.
Right. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's such an interesting question, and that could be a topic.
That's all learning course. We are in such an interesting time because to watch different companies respond to something like Black Lives Matter, and how far down one end of the spectrum or the other. There were the ones who sent out the little, or there were the ones who did nothing. Then there were the ones who sent out maybe the one-off email, and I've been joking, the email they bought at the CEO email template store. That was like, Black Lives Matter and we don't tolerate discrimination. Like, okay, well, that's not cutting it. All the way down to companies like, I just saw this the other day, Ben and Jerry's, the ice cream, has been writing blog after blog about all sorts of social problems and issues, and just really taking a stance on what needs to be happening in our society and in organizations. And so they're going to attract a lot of diverse talent. And it's been sort of fascinating to watch. And then the more and more we open the doors for people to be themselves at work and not have to fit in some sort of box, the more organizations are going to be pushed into what you're saying. I mean, what you just said, I would not apply for a job if they didn't have some sort of DEI, something in place where I could see they were working on this. And I think lots of people are going to take that stance now and in the future. So that's cool. We're in a cool time.
You bet. I mean, I know this topic was, when to leave a toxic work environment, but and that's again a very specific topic, and certainly something that if anyone wanted to have a chat with me personally from an employee standpoint, certainly reach out to me. But in looking at how to keep yourself, like once you're out, right, and how to keep yourself from going back into a company like that. There's just so many resources that you can look up in order to figure out the stance of a company. And honestly, if you're looking at jobs in the very beginning, you're on LinkedIn, right? And you are looking for specific companies and specific roles. I will tell you that the job rec itself, boy, does that provide a ton of information, right? If they're speaking to it directly, and they have worked at their recruiting initiatives, and they are stating right then and there, hey, we are inclusive. It's gotta be more than just saying, yes, we're inclusive. Yes. If they're actually going through, and even as you're going through and you are doing the application process, and it's asking, it builds out gender identification. Wow, that's a huge one, right? And that's one of the first things that I look for. What are all the marginalized groups that they are listing? If they are more current, that tells me, okay, they've been doing some research, they've been doing some work. And again, going on their social media, going on their blogs, going on LinkedIn, what are they writing about? Are they just making sure that their company website looks diverse, but then you go and you look at their employees and none of them speak to the pictures that they have on their website, right? In terms of, you can see so many companies, Black Lives Matter, and then they're going on and they are redesigning their homepage website, and it shows diversity, and yet
it's not an iStock photo with
that's exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's from Adobe Stock. I know that one.
I've seen that before. I think that's on somebody else's.
That's exactly. Yeah, and then you go, like, you can go on LinkedIn and you can look at the employees.
Yeah. I shouldn't say this, but recently I was contacted to do some subcontracting work with a company that was diversity something or other was in their title, and they were a training company. And then, I looked at their website and I'm like, that's pretty interesting that you're calling yourselves diversity, whatever the company was, but everybody's white. Where is everybody else? Everybody's a female identifying white person.
That is exactly it. I just made up a new word. Exactly. That should have been exactly. If we were doing a LinkedIn learning course, I would have had to stop production right there. Can you please go back? You would have had to do the same thing for me.
Oh man, I miss you. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. I'm going to come visit you because you're one of my safe space people.
Well, and vice versa, vice versa. It's so fun when you get to work with someone such as yourself, an SME, and then become friends. Like
Yes.
not just have the opportunity to work and laugh and have fun and dance. And we
Yeah.
have, we have that on video.
Dancing.
We got that on video. But then to also have it turn into just an amazing friendship. You are one of my people, Catherine.
Oh, you're one of my people. And that's the beauty of being able to be your whole self at work, right? Because then you really do make friends with the people you work with. And if you respect and are friends with the people you work with, then you're more likely to perform and deliver because you owe your friend a promise versus these organizations where it's like, let's just pretend we're all a certain way and, but still be productive. So, well, Hilary, I really appreciate you being with me today. Where can everybody get a hold of you in case they want to take you up on a chat about what to do if you're an employee in a toxic work environment?
Honestly, the best place, because I am always on LinkedIn, hit me up on LinkedIn. It is one of the best places. So just send me a private message, go on my wall. And it's under Hilary P. White, but you can find me. And please reach out. I'd be more than happy to chat about it. I've had this conversation with so many people, and more than happy to help out.
Oh, thank you. We have one fan, Julian, says, thanks for the great discussion this morning. We were very insightful. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Julian.
All right. Thank you so much, Hilary, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Catherine.